close are we anyway? 58 seconds. Okay. Go live. Greetings, everybody. It is I, the Nomad, coming to you live from the wastelands of the internet to bring you news. Well, news as I see it, news that's important to me. All right, and let's see how things go. Good morning to everybody, and Merry Christmas. I have returned from the East Coast, where it was very, very cold. All right. For those who don't know, I was invited by my daughter, all right, to a live Pittsburgh Steelers game, which I attended, and it was, oh my God, cold. All right, it was a great time. Had a good time. Lost my voice, screaming and yelling, but that is what it was. Let's get to the news, shall we? Zelensky says the U.S. has mooted direct Ukraine-Russia talks on ending the war in Miami. Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev said he was heading to Miami while Ukrainian and European teams are also in the sunny American city for negotiations mediated by Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and U.S. President's son-in-law Jared Kushner. They proposed this format as far as I understand: Ukraine, America, Russia, Zelensky said, adding that the Europeans could be present and it would be logical to hold a joint meeting after we understand the potential results of the meeting that are already taking place. All right. Okay. Enough of this nonsense, folks. Okay. Here's a more realistic assessment of things. The U.S. has made progress on securing a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, but there's still a way to go, said Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I think we made progress, but we have a ways to go, and obviously the hardest issues are always the last issues, Rubio said at the State Department briefing, noting that the ultimate agreement will have to come from both sides. Okay, there's a problem with that. And the problem is twofold. Okay? The first problem is Russia has no incentive to stop the war. They're winning. That's how they view it. I'm not saying they're winning in the sense of I'm not claiming anything. But from Vladimir Putin's we say it correctly. From Vladimir Putin's perspective, they're winning. Why should they stop? Why should they make a deal? There's no reason for them, in this sense, to make a deal with anybody. From the Ukrainian perspective, they're being told, okay, you're damaging Russia. You're continuing to damage it. Keep doing it. They'll quit eventually. They'll quit eventually. You just gotta hold out. You just gotta hold out. And they're fighting and they're dying. Are they doing things? Yeah. Are they damaging Russian and killing Russian troops? Certainly. Are they having enough of an impact? No. Last week they hit a Russian Kilo submarine. Okay? In port. Okay. Did that change the war? Did it change the dynamics of the war? Why did you even target a Kilo submarine? What military advantage was there to that? You're looking for some kind of strategic advantage in this case. Specifically, for those who don't understand this, during the American Civil War, the only chance the South had was to get the North to quit. And whether people want to admit this or not, it's the same strategy here with the Ukraine. The advantage that the Ukrainians have is they're able to get supplies easily through Europe to continue this war effort. They are receiving massive tons and influence of foreign supplies to continue the war. This is something the South had difficulty doing, getting supplies into material supplies to continue the war effort. That is not necessarily a problem for the Ukrainians. But getting the Russians to quit is. Convincing the Russians to quit is a problem. Especially when Vladimir Zelensky and his European cohorts are playing silly games. Volodymyr Zelensky backstabbed the U.S., all right, in my perspective. And now he has thrown all of his marbles in with the EU, but the EU are backstabbing weasels. Now, maybe he thinks he understands them. Maybe Zelensky thinks that, all I need is the European support. Because he thinks that the Europeans could drag the United States around by the nose. And during the Biden administration, that's exactly what was happening. The problem is the Americans there's two problems with that strategy. First, that's not Donald Trump. Second, the American people are getting tired of this. And the Europeans are backstabbing the United States on a repeated basis about this war. And there's going to be a comeuppance. And I feel sorry for the Ukrainians, but the comeuppance is going to be, we're going to pull our freaking, all of our support out and just let the Europeans have at it. Because the Europeans will roll over immediately and hand the Ukraine directly, and then they'll try to blame the United States. Oh, it's because the United States pulled out. That's what I foresee happening. Unless the Europeans really get serious, and they're not serious. The Europeans are not doing anything. And I mean this. The Europeans are doing nothing, all right, when it comes to sacrificing and taking hits to their economy that the United States has been taking on a repeated basis. Because we are sanctioning Russia. We are sanctioning China. We are sanctioning India. in an effort to actually stop the war. Europeans are doing none of that. They're not doing anything. Oh yeah, we're being really tough. We're being tough. Well, we're still getting Russian oil. We're really being tough. We're really being tough. But we're still going to sit up there and get, you know, Chinese, supplies. We're not changing any of that. We're really being tough. Well, India is still getting Russian oil, so we're going to be fine. That's what you got going on right now. That's what you have going on right now. It's an untenable position for the United States. And the Europeans' comeuppance is this: you're going to have to pay for your own friggin' security now. Because you screwed over the United States one too damn many times. Good luck to you. That's all I got to say. Good luck to you. Reporters see firsthand dangerous Chinese maneuvers during towards Philippines shipping. Reporters from the Kyoto News and other media outlets witnessed firsthand recently just how close vessels from China and the Philippines are getting to one another during the two nations' long running territorial dispute in the South China Sea. The reporters were aboard a 44-meter Philippine Coast Guard patrol ship earlier this month when it and two other Philippine vessels were shadowed for over 4 hours by three China Coast Guard ships, one of which came within 300 meters. The Philippine ships were on a mission between December 12th and December 14th to deliver supplies to fishermen at the Sabina Shoal within the country's exclusive economic zone, one of several contested shoals in the resource rich sea and an emerging flashpoint in the dispute. The two Philippine Coast Guard vessels and a government funded supply boat were halfway through their journey to the shoal when they were intercepted by the three Chinese patrol ships, Chinese patrol ships. Every time we sped up, they sped up too, a Philippine Coast Guard official said in a frustrated tone. As the Philippine ships got closer to the shoal, the Chinese vessels became even more aggressive, forcing the Philippine ships to stop or slow down. The game of cat and mouse carried on until early evening on December 12th before the Philippine Coast Guard finally turned around and headed to a different shoal. The Philippine Coast Guard later said that the Chinese Coast Guard had issued multiple radio warnings to them to turn off course or suffer the consequences. It's hard to move forward when your ship may get water cannon. We also had to think about the safety of our crew, the official told reporters. The decision to withdraw was made hours after another group of Chinese Coast Guard vessels had fired water cannons at a Filipino fisherman at the shoal and cut the anchor lines to their boats, injuring three of them and damaging two fishing boats in what the Chinese or the Philippines said was China's first direct attack on a civilian fisherman. And okay, the Chinese are bad. Really, does it surprise anybody? Does this surprise anyone? I think what surprises people more is this: Japan needs to possess nuclear weapons, says Prime Minister's office. A source within the Prime Minister's office said Thursday that the country needs nuclear weapons, remarks that deviate from the country's long standing non nuclear principles and could trigger backlash at home and abroad. We think we should possess nuclear weapons, said the source, who is involved in devising security policy under the government led by Prime Minister Sane Takaichi. All right, while also indicating that such a move is unrealistic. The remarks came as Takaichi, known for her hawkish security views, is considered reviewing Japan's non nuclear principles, long upheld given the country's status as the only nation to have suffered atomic bombings. During the exchange with reporters, the source was asked about the idea of possessing nuclear weapons. Acknowledging the necessity of the destructive weapons, the source said, in the end, we can only rely on ourselves. Japan has the capability to produce nuclear weapons in large and extended quantities. Anybody who doesn't understand this, all right, they're making a mistake. Japan has that capability. Will they do it? Who knows? They've got the technology, and they have, believe it or not, they have the resources. People don't understand this. Japan has plenty, hundreds and hundreds of tons of plutonium, which they could, quote unquote, enrich and then utilize. Will they? Don't know. But this also could be a gambit to say, okay, we need nuclear weapons. We need nuclear weapons. Okay, we'll settle for carriers. It could just be a public posturing to increase the willingness of the public to understand that they have to start increasing their own defense because of the aggressive stances of both Russia and China. There's a realization that if you don't want the United States to be the world's policeman, and obviously the rest of the world wants to sit up there and spit at us, all right? If you don't want us to be the world's policeman, fine. Then we will stop being the world's policeman. We will stop burning through American manpower and treasury for the sake of others, when it's not reciprocated or even appreciated. Now, Japan has been a more solid ally in many regards than the Europeans have ever been. But when it comes to the aggression of Xi Jinping and what's going on, there's a world of hurt coming down there. Because you can only rob Peter to pay Paul for so long before a world of hurt comes down. Elsewhere in the world, Ghana receives Nigeria's military aircraft personnel released by the Burkina Faso authorities. Ghana has received a Nigerian military aircraft and 11 personnel released by the authorities of the Burkina Faso, the Ghanaian presidency said in a statement early Saturday. Larry Gebavlo Larte, special envoy of the Ghanaian President John Damarini Mahama, all right, to the alliance of Sahel states who received the aircraft and the personnel, commended the governments of Nigeria and Burkina Faso for resolving the impasse amicably through diplomatic means. This incident is an indication that we are brothers and sisters in the West African subregion and can resolve our differences in a neighborly manner. Yeah, no. Okay. Um, Nigeria has maintained that the C-130 military transport made an emergency landing as a precaution after a technical issue was detected shortly after takeoff. Burkina Faso, however, insisted that the aircraft had violated its airspace and sovereignty. After days of diplomatic engagement with Burkinabe officials, all right, Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs Yusuf Tugar visited Ouagadougou. I'm not trying to butcher that. I think that's how you pronounce it. The capital of Burkina Faso, to apologize for the incident and facilitate the release of the detained personnel. Good luck, folks, because that region's going to become more and more unstable as time goes by. Man convicted of ramming into pedestrians on Christmas Day in London. An Englishman was convicted of ramming his Mercedes into a crowd last Christmas Day, killing a young man and seriously injuring four others in a drunken rage in London. Anthony Gilhini, 31, of Longview, Harlow, was found guilty of murder, attempted murder, and wounding with intent after a trial at the Old Bailey, sentencing to be set for January 19th, the Metropolitan Police said. He faces mandatory life sentence, the Guardian has reported. Okay. Here's my question. This is a question I would ask, and even though I know it's very similar in the United States. You grab this guy right away. You finally convicted him, okay, but why is it a year later? You nabbed this guy right away. This guy should have been, the trial for this guy should have been in March, June at the latest. Border mystery. Elderly U.S. woman found sedated and dumped in wheelchair by the side of the road 200 miles away in Mexico. An elderly woman who had been missing for months has been found dumped in a wheelchair on a dirt road in Mexico 200 miles away from her home. Nilda Perales Ramos, believed to be in her 90s, appeared to be heavily sedated and was showing signs of hypothermia when she was discovered. Emergency services received an anonymous tip about someone who appeared unconscious beside a rural tract in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, all right, on 17 December. Paramedics from the Mexican Red Cross found the woman slumped in a wheelchair without shelter, fully exposed to rain and plummeting temperatures. The grueling conditions and suspected sedation left the woman showing signs of hypothermia and severe dehydration. She was given emergency treatment at the scene before being transferred to the General Hospital in Matamoros. All right, um, where she remains under medical observation. The hospital director, Geraldo Garcia Solanas, said she woke up and was lucid enough to remember her name. She identified herself as Nilda Perales Ramos, originally from Laredo in the United States, or in the U.S. state of Texas, and told investigators that she did not have close family. It later emerged that friends and relatives in Laredo had been searching for her for 5 months. She reportedly crossed into Mexico on 12 June and was later hospitalized. She was in Mexico when relatives lost contact. Initial reports, including testimonies gathered by Quatrain, indicate that Nilda was drugged. The substance given to her remains unknown. Meanwhile, the elderly woman will stay under supervision to stabilize her as efforts are made to establish contact with her relatives. Officials say that once she is discharged from medical care, she will be placed in a nursing facility. Um, Unfortunately, elder care and so forth in this country, in the United States, let alone Mexico, is in need of revisement, serious revisement. It's very difficult and unfortunate for these people, all right, that are part of this and having these kind of incidents. Okay, so and then more news on the United States. The Justice Department releases limited set of files tied to Epstein's sex trafficking investigation. The Justice Department released thousands of files Friday. It wasn't thousands, it was hundreds of thousands. All right, about convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. But the important incomplete document dump did not break significant ground about the long running criminal investigation of the financier or his ties to wealthy and powerful individuals. Files include photographs of famous people who spent time with Epstein in the years before he came under suspicion, including some candid snapshots of Bill Clinton, who flew on Epstein's jet and invited him to the White House in the years before the financier was accused of wrongdoing. But there was almost no material related to another old Epstein friend, President Donald Trump, aside from a few well known images, sparing the White House from having to confront fresh questions about the relationship of the administration has tried in vain to minimize. No, you mean you're trying Michael Sisak, Jerry Tucker, and Alana Durkin Richer. All right. You guys have been trying in vain to come up with things to blame Trump for, all right, to obfuscate who Jeffrey Epstein was. That's not the only story. Silent Trump flees growing storm over Epstein cover up as he jets off for holidays without any comment. President Donald Trump remains silent amid accusations of a cover up after the release of thousands of files, hundreds of thousands, all right, to convict pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He was not a convicted pedophile. Hate to tell you that. He was convicted of wrongdoing, but I don't think he was convicted of being a pedophilia. In fact, let's go ahead and let's go to Google and since we're on over here, let's see what he was. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I am curious to see if I'm wrong about this. What was Epstein convicted of? Shall we find out? I don't want that. Let's see. He was convicted as a child sex offender. Okay, so I take that back. Take everything I said back. All right. He was a convicted sex offender or a pedophile. All right. I mean, I have no doubt about that. Do not misunderstand me. I wasn't saying that. But I thought he had been convicted of a lesser crime. Right? Presidents hyped the economy while speaking at a rally in North Carolina on Friday, but he declined to address the growing outrage over his refusal to release all the documents related to Epstein. I want the documents released. I really do. I know why they're not doing it. Like I said, I shouldn't say I know. I suspect. All right. In my opinion, the reason is because of why Jeffrey Epstein, okay, got off light because of a call from the CIA. He was a CIA asset. This was sent to the FBI. They don't want people to understand what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. Jeffrey Epstein was compromising people so that we could sit up there and utilize them in a dirty tricks type of environment against targets from the United States, specifically in the Middle East. Jeffrey Epstein was known to have many Middle East contacts, yet every time they talk about who was in these photos, nobody mentions this. Nobody mentions the many people, okay, the many CEOs that are doing business around the world and especially the Middle East. Nobody mentions them. They mention Trump, they mention Clinton, they mention Prince Andrew repeatedly. Now the big issue with Prince Andrew is he was caught laying across the laps of five women. Okay, but nobody wants to talk about the other people, and this, of course, is what people are complaining about. But the press wants to focus on Trump, 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 Bill Clinton once in a while. Trump, 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 Trump. They know very well that Trump isn't the issue here. But the problem is they don't want to go after what's really going on. They don't want to dismantle the real problem. Another big story here in the United States. Here's why Claudio Neves Valente may have targeted Brown University and the MIT professor. Now, I read this entire frickin' article. You'll love this. The Brown University and MIT professor shooter, right, whined that the Ivy League school's food was lousy and its classes were too easy, it surfaced Friday, along with new details about his academic competition with the teacher he killed. Claudio Neves Valente, the 48-year-old Portuguese national, was miserable on Brown's leafy Rhode Island campus and had a laundry list of complaints while briefly enrolled as a physics grad student. There were more than 25 years ago, a former pal and classmate told the Post. I remember him getting irritated about the quality of food on campus, especially the lack of high quality fish. Scott Watson said of Neves Valente, who fatally shot two Brown students, wounded nine others in a rampage at a study hall last week. He often complained about moving to the United States and about the university. Then you shouldn't have been here. Okay? He would say the classes were too easy. Honestly, for him, they were, Watson said. He already knew most of the material. While Neves Valente was sometimes brilliant and could be gentle, he also had a dark side, including when he bullied another classmate and called him his slave because he was from Brazil, an ex-friend said. I had to break up a fight once between them, Watson said. Neves Valente stopped communicating with his well-to-do family in Portugal shortly after his stint at Brown, Kin told New York Times. His devastated parents hadn't heard from him for 2 decades, only seeing him again when his picture appeared in the media after he killed himself Thursday night as the cops closed in, the outlet said. His mother said this morning that she had always worried that the next time she would hear about him, he would be dead. Mitra Domingos, all right, told a relative told the Times. Neves Valente's last known address was a two-bedroom condo in a gleaming waterfront high-rise in Miami, Florida, worth at least $900,000 according to records and law enforcement sources. Okay, he, this whole thing, he killed people because of the what? Bad food? He didn't like the fact that we don't have enough fish in America, that we don't eat fish in America. This is what we're dealing with. He went to a few physics bowl things, all right, where he competed against other people in the physics bowls and he felt he was smarter than everybody else. That's the reason he went after everybody else? Look, I'm not saying that this guy didn't do it, okay? I'm not saying that what it was. I do have questions. How the hell can you afford a $900,000 condo, right, in Miami? And they said, where's he getting this money from? I'm serious. Where was he getting that money from? His parents supposedly hadn't heard from him, right? He was estranged from them. You're living in the United States. Where are you getting the money for that? Was it purchased 20 years ago by his parents for him? There's a lot of questions I gotta ask. There's a lot of questions here. And this, I'm sorry, is not a motive. I don't like the fish in America. Okay. I'm very upset. I don't like being in America. No, I'm stopping him from leaving. Why was this guy here? Why hadn't he gone home? There's too many holes here, folks, and the media is not up to the challenge, apparently, of telling us the truth as to what's going on. When you have asinine comments like this, there's a 92% chance that Trump is making it up when riffing the president exhibits all the unusual tells. The president Donald Trump likes to use big numbers to anchor his point, especially when he wanders off target. Often it seems to be that a specific figure is on the tip of his tongue. At this year's ceremonial turkey pardon, he praised a farmer from Wayne County, North Carolina, for raising two record-setting birds, but then pivoted on his own electoral margin victory. I won that county by 92%. In fact, he won it by 16 percentage points. Okay, this is the problem with the press. Yes, the president exaggerates things, all right, in a tongue-in-cheek manner. He does it all the time. We understand that. But you're not being honest. If you're worried about how this makes the government look bad, or you can't trust the numbers from the Trump administration. You can't trust any of the numbers from the government. We have evidence after evidence, all right, that you were giving us numbers that you knew were bad. That you people in the media knew were lies from Biden, trying to peddle it off without ever telling us these are fraudulent. Hell, you got a scandal right now where the police chief of Washington, D.C. just resigned. Oh, but she didn't resign because of the scandal where she was cooking the books and uses inflated numbers that were done purely for political reasons, that were being done purely to sit up there and try and push a political agenda. She didn't do any of that. Now you're going to complain about this? All right, just a few more stories. Florida woman was arrested Wednesday for driving a stolen car to a federal courthouse where she was on trial for her alleged role in a conspiracy to defraud $29 million from the government COVID relief loan and grant programs. Latoya Clark, 39, was blocks away from the U.S. District Court in Fort Pierce when a license plate reader flagged her vehicle as being stolen. Clark was behind the wheel of a 2025 Ram ProMaster cargo van when she was pulled over by a sheriff's deputy around 8:30 a.m. After Clark exited the vehicle and was handcuffed, a cop explained why she was being detained. "Oh, I know why," she said. All right, Clark reportedly said, adding that she was en route to a federal courthouse because she was on trial for a federal crime. According to court records, Clark obtained the van 2 months ago in a 1 day rental from U-Haul. When she failed to return the vehicle, it was reportedly still reported stolen. Charged with a felony, she was booked in the county jail, which made her a no-show that morning in federal court, where she was indicted in May for conspiracy, money laundering, and wire fraud. According to prosecutors, Clark and 5 co-defendants engaged in a multi-year scheme to file phony COVID relief applications. The alleged fraudsters submitted 92 bogus claims, which netted them $29 million in Paycheck Protection Program funds, money that was eventually laundered through a web of shell companies. Clark, who allegedly controlled 3 corporations used in the fraud operation, was free on $250,000 bond, all right, in the federal case. Several of the felonies for which Clark was charged carry maximum 20-year sentences. Following her arrest, her bond was revoked, right? By Judge Aline Cannon. Yes, that Aline Cannon. Cannon rejected a defense argument that Clark's retention of the U-Haul van was born entirely out of poverty, desperation, and survival, and that she was living out of stolen wheels. The jury in the federal case was selected yesterday, and opening arguments were scheduled for today. $29 million in false COVID relief funds. Final stories. A drop bear. A bus driver in Brisbane, Australia, spotted a koala darting through traffic on a busy road and brought the animal aboard the vehicle to wait for rescuers. Koala Rescue Brisbane South said on social media that the Brisbane City Glider bus driver spotted the koala on Wild Street at Camp Hill and got out to rescue the animal. The koala attempted to climb a metal light pole in the median, and the driver, fearing the marsupial would fall, covered its head with his jacket and brought it onto the bus. We don't recommend handling koalas unless you're trained. They have incredibly dangerous claws, can bite, and gripping them around their ribs can cause serious damage. If you find an injured koala and it's safe to contain it without touching it until help arrives, please do so. Anywhere dark is good for wildlife. Usually we recommend a laundry basket covered with a towel. If this needs be, a bus will do. Video and photos shared by the rescue show the koala, dubbed Perry by the rescuers, holding onto a pole inside the bus while waiting for wildlife experts to arrive. Rescuers took Perry to the RSPCA Wildlife Hospital, where he was given a clean bill of health. He was relocated to the Seven Hills Bushland reserved to and returned to the wild. Yeah. Final story of the day, folks. Final story. California zoo escaped hornbill found at country club. A California zoo announced a hornbill, a large exotic bird native to Africa, was found at a country club after a weekend on the loose. Looking for his Don Perignon. The Living Desert Zoo and Gardens in Palm Desert, all right, said Philly, a southern ground hornbill, escaped while being transferred to a holding area on Thursday. Philly was spotted Monday at the Reserve Club, a country club near the zoo in the mountain hills or in the mountain foothills of Indian Wells. This is Palm Springs, folks. So the Palm Spring area, for those who don't know. All right, so this animal is in a posh neighborhood here. Animal care staff rushed to the location where they were able to successfully bring the bird home. I am happy to report that the bird appears healthy and uninjured following its brief adventure. The 8-year-old male hornbill is currently undergoing veterinary evaluation and will eventually be placed in the habitat with female Mabel. He was just going for a golf outing. Don't you understand that? He had a scheduled tea time. He just couldn't miss. All right? That's just the way it is. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I hope you all have a good day, and I will talk at you all later. Thank you for coming.